Real talk. I quit fighting games back in college because I scared my girlfriend. After losing to her in MBC3, I'm punching a hole in my wall. I love fighting games, but the anger and frustration it was causing me was overwhelming, so I felt like I had to quit. About 10 years later, here I am back when a friend of mine got me to check out SF6, and sure enough, the anger came back too. Luckily, I learned a lot since then, about myself, my mind, and my emotions. I'm no expert, but as someone who's had to go through that level of rage and overcome it, I want to share that experience with everyone. I want to go deeper than the usual, just take a break, or better yet,
it's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
So this video will dive into the mind and ego and emotions. We'll go over the practical steps on what to do when the tilt kicks in, because it's an experience everyone has in fighting games. Tilt isn't some sort of unique thing to fighting games. We use that term a lot, but in reality, it's just anger, frustration, disappointment, and even shame, all wrapped up together. It's you having an emotional response. Sorry to say this, but surprise, you're human. I joke, but honestly, that's where this all starts. Your mind naturally, emotionally responds to things happening. We don't control it. It just happens on its own. It's a natural function of the mind. Having emotions is normal, even ones like rage and disappointment. We may not like feeling them, but they are just a function of our mind. This is why I say don't avoid tilt. Trying to avoid tilt is like trying to say you're going to stop your mind from feeling. You never stop feeling. The response happens regardless if you want it or not. Now, you may rebut with how there are people out there that can completely control their emotions, like a Zen monk or those tall hat guys in the UK. To that, I would say they're not controlling the emotion. The emotion still happens within them. What they control is their reaction to the feeling. That is the first step I took to overcome my anger. It was accepting that I'm going to get upset, I'm going to tilt, it's a thing that's just going to happen even if I don't want it to. So instead of trying to control the emotion, which I can't control anyway, what I should do is find a way to control my reaction to it. Another aspect of the mind that tends to get in the way is our expectations. The mind hates it when things don't line up, when you expect one thing but another thing happens. The mind wants to avoid the confusion and the disharmony that happens afterwards. And in fighting games, that happens all the time. You expect a strike, but they throw you instead. You expect a low, but they hit you with an overhead. But it goes deeper than that, because worst of all, you expect to win. Those expectations are things that tend to trigger the tilt, and the more tightly you hold on to those expectations, the more it throws the mind into chaos when things don't go how you want them to. Understanding the mind is a complex ordeal, but understanding that emotional responses are normal and not trying to stop them, it'll be a step in the right direction. In the description, I'm going to leave some links to other videos that help dive deeper on aspects of the mind, but now that we have a better understanding of our emotions and the mind, let's go over what we can actually do about our tilt. To start, we need awareness. Sometimes when people tilt, they're so blinded by the rage that they don't realize that they're tilted themselves. It's like when a friend comes by and says, "Hey man, chill." That's basically the universal sign that you're blinded in that moment by your emotional response. For some, being aware of the tilt isn't difficult, but for some others, it is. By the time you realize you're tilted, you've already slammed the desk. It's okay, that's going to happen. Building awareness does take some time, but it gets easier the more you do it. After every match, ask yourself, how am I feeling? Are your hands stiff? Is your heart racing? Is your head full from stress? Those are the kinds of signs you can check to see if you're starting to tilt. Secondly, when you recognize you're tilting, or maybe already are tilted, this is where you need to pause. The common advice here is take a break. And they're right, if you need a break, take it. But the reason that it's a common piece of advice is because what you're actually doing is allowing the emotion to dissipate. You don't have to take a break to do this, however. Sit there and let the emotion through. When we're feeling that anger and rage in us, we tend to push back against it. We don't like that feeling. We don't want to feel it. You try to resist it, push it away. That, in and of itself, will just cause it to stick and harass you for longer. You need to let it through. Accept that you're feeling tilted. The way I would do this is to focus on the way my body feels when I'm angry. Usually my forearms start to hurt as they're tense, almost like they're getting ready to hit something. My heart rate is up so I can feel my blood pulsating. I feel hotter, like I can feel the heat on my skin. I observe myself in anger. Acknowledge that, yep, I'm tilted right now. I can feel it. Sit there and just let the emotion through. So, I know this doesn't sound like we're fixing anything. You're probably questioning how useful this would even be since you're tilted anyway, so that doesn't really address the issue. But again, I want to go back to the point that I made about emotions. You can't stop feeling the anger. You can't control it, but you can control your reaction. What we're really trying to do here is getting used to feeling tilted and let the emotion subside. This is also called emotional processing. In the short term, it's not going to feel like much changed. I know, I did this process. It takes a bit. And by a bit, I mean like a week. But over time, as you do this more and more, you'll notice a change. This ability to process emotions is kind of like learning to use your anti-air, funnily enough. When you want to practice your anti-air, you have to recognize the opponent has jumped, pause what you were doing, and instead switch to anti-air mode, and then use that anti-air to stop them. As you do this more and more, what happens? You get faster and faster at those steps. You recognize your opponent's in the air faster, you don't have to think about what your anti-air button is, and you start nailing that anti-air consistently. The same thing happens here. As you let the anger through, not pushing against it, allowing it to happen when you feel it, you'll get better and better at it. For me, when I first started this, it would take me like 20 minutes to calm down. It felt like so long having to just sit there with the anger. But as I did it more, those 20 minutes became 15 minutes, then 10 minutes, 5 minutes. There is a point where you subconsciously start to recognize the tilt mid-match and start to process it even then. This is how we're controlling the reaction to the emotion. The emotion is still happening, but we're no longer swayed by it so drastically. It's fighting games. Frustrating, cheap-ass things will happen, especially in a game like Guilty Gear. You're just going to run into a matchup you hate, and it's going to frustrate you. That's fine. Now you know how to handle it. For me, the frustration is still there. It's never gone away. I still feel it. When I started doing this, I could only play about 10 minutes of fighting games before the tilt was too high and I needed to log off. I knew that if I kept playing, I was just going to break something. As I worked through this process, those 10 minutes became 20, 30, an hour. I think my longest session has been like a little over 2 hours now. And for some of you, that seems like nothing. But to me, who struggled with this anger that badly, this was huge. I could actually enjoy fighting games again, and that was the best thing ever. There is one big elephant in the room about this that I do want to mention, and it's the thing that probably has you feeling stuck when it comes to tilt, and that's your mental health. And I don't mean mental health as in you need therapy for tilt, though not a bad idea, but rather I mean how you feel mentally affects how well you can process that tilt. If you have a negative view of yourself, if you have low self-esteem, if you're egotistical, if you hate losing, if you feel like a loser every time you lose a match, all that adds a ton of stress to your mind. And the emotional response you're having is related to these things. My issue, probably the root of my anger, is because I had unreasonable expectations for myself. I'm a brain-based player, so I like to learn a lot about fighting games, their design and technical aspects, because it's cool to me. So I gathered a lot of knowledge about the game. But knowledge doesn't just make you win. I would play the game expecting myself to win since I knew a lot about the game, and subsequently lose. Why? Because I didn't have the experience. I don't play that often. As the channel shows, I'm a casual. So I don't have the muscle memory and habits built in to know what to do. And the most tilting thing of all for me is when I would get into situations I had no idea what I'm supposed to do. Fighting someone like Sin was hell the first number of times because I had no idea what I could do to escape his pressure. That overwhelming sense of not knowing was both crushing to my ego, but also tilted me like no other. This is what I mean about the mental health aspect of this. If you have larger issues about yourself or issues with your ego, that tilt will keep hitting just as strong. Recognizing where the tilt comes from is perhaps the truest way of avoiding tilt. Here, you're not avoiding the tilt by not feeling it, but rather your mind no longer emotionally responds with anger when something upsetting happens. This is why some people get hit with a mix-up and laugh, while others get hit with a mix-up and rage.
Oh shit, crush. I'ma block this whack ass mix up.
The way their mind is reacting to the situation is different, so whatever issue you may have, you need to explore and figure out what that is. But if you can address it, that will be the biggest silver bullet you can use against him. Understanding my issues and getting to this point of being able to enjoy fighting games again was life-changing in all honesty. Fighting games really challenge the player to learn and grow both in and out of the game. And because of that growth, I was able to start this channel. This is a part of fighting games I don't see people talk deeply enough about. There is a lot to unpack, so if you would like to hear more about what I've done to get my anger managed and how I changed my perspective overall, let me know in the comments. Hope this helps you all enjoy fighting games more, even if we are just playing it casually.